Okay, welcome everyone to Daf Yomi, 1 week at a time. This is Masechet Menachot. Today is our 7th class of this Masechet, and we are going to be reviewing Daf 45 through 51, which was yesterday's Daf. This way, next week when we meet on Wednesday, so we'll do Wednesday to Wednesday. Anybody, if anyone lives in Yerushalayim listening to this, so Purim Sameach. I hope everyone had a wonderful Purim. Things are a little complicated at the moment in Israel, so Be'ezrat Hashem, we should just have only good news, Besorot Tovot. If for some reason there is a siren while we are learning, so I will pause the recording, and Be'ezrat Hashem, I will come back to that record. I'll come back when I can. So, okay, let's begin on Daf 45. The Mishnah tells us that if you remember, we've been discussing, or the Mishnayot that we've been discussing, we're talking about things that either are essential one for the other or are not essential one for the other, right? The term in Hebrew is me'akev. Does one thing affect the other? So, we are now on a series of Mishnayot that say that the following things are not me'akev each other, meaning they are linked, but not linked enough that it will matter that something is... if something is wrong. So the bulls, the rams, and the lambs, these are not football teams, but animals in the Beit HaMikdash. These are the sacrifices of the Musaf, and they are not me'akev each other, meaning they're not essential one for the other. And if you have too many, if you have many bulls, but not enough Nesachim are the libations that come with each sacrifice, then you should only bring one bull with the appropriate Nesachim. Like the Nesachim are wine and oil, and mincha. So we're going to see what we do for each thing. So the Gemara explains, first of all, what are we talking about? So one opinion is maybe it's the Musaf of Sukkot, where there are many korbanot, many sacrifices that are brought on Sukkot. But those would be essential one for the other because we need all of those sacrifices. So Daf 45 tells us maybe we're talking about Rosh Chodesh or maybe Shavuot, but those holidays do not have rams and they only have one. So maybe, so then the Gemara says, okay, let's look at the sacrifices for Shavuot. They're mentioned in Vayikra, in the book of Vayikra, where there are 2 rams, and in Bamidbar, it mentions 1 ram. And so the Gemara says that these two categories are not ma'akev each other. They're not essential for each other. The bulls aren't ma'akev each other, but the rams are. There's a verse in Yechezkel that mentions 1 bull, and that's to teach us that if you only have 1 bull, so then that is okay, and you can just bring 1, even though really you're supposed to bring multiple. And if you have sheep, if you don't have 7, right? So usually you're supposed to bring 7. If you don't have 7, you can bring 6 or 5 or 4 or 3 or 2 or 1. And basically, you should bring as many as you can get, right? Which is interesting because we've been discussing all the fine details of all the sacrifices. But you also have to recognize that there were times in history where they couldn't get all the sacrifices that they needed. So here the Gemara is telling us there that, basically to bring whatever you can bring. And don't think that if you don't have all of them, you can't bring the sacrifices. Okay, the bull of Rosh Chodesh, this is an olah, it's a burnt offering, and it cleanses the altar, the mizbeach, and the verse in Yechezkel it will be eventually interpreted by Eliyahu in the future, that when they inaugurate the next, again, Yechezkel is speaking at the end of the first temple period. And he is prophesizing about the inauguration of the temple in the second temple, right? So he is giving a prophecy for what will happen in the future, that when Ezra comes back, right, in the period of what's called Shivat Zion, when they return to Zion, that there will be this this bull, for Rosh Chodesh. Another verse of Yechezkel talks about a bird that is a nevela, right? A nevela is an animal that dies, either natural causes or anything other than being slaughtered, and it's a shrifa, meaning there's something wrong with the animal and you can't eat it. Another verse from Yechezkel is brought, and it's talking about the 7th of Nisan, and it's about, and then they talk about the way they interpret the verse is it's actually speaking about the bull, what's called the Par He'elem Davar. We learned about this sacrifice of the, when the nation does something accidentally wrong, and it's the at least 7 tribes sinned. That's a majority of the nation, and then they have to bring this sacrifice. And they didn't, again, right? They forgot a law, and then they acted on it. Okay. Hanina ben Chizkiah explained many discrepancies of verses in Yechezkel. How did he do this? He secluded himself in an attic so that he can save the book of Yechezkel from being concealed. The idea was that they did not understand certain verses and they thought maybe there was something, I don't want to use the word something wrong with the book, but maybe because of the discrepancies, they weren't sure about the validity of this book. But because of Hanina ben Chizkiah, who resolved the discrepancies, it was saved and part of Tanakh. Then the Gemara talks about the mincha. Again, right, our grain offering is different for the bull than it is for the ram. Again, the larger the sacrifice, the more nesachim, the more libations are used for it. But the verse in Yechezkel implies that they're actually the same. Why is that? Because if you don't have enough nesachim, if you don't have enough libations, then you only bring, as we said, one bull or one ram, depending on what you have. Okay, the next Mishnah is going to talk about the different sacrifices that are brought on Shavuot. Okay, so if you remember, we had the Shtei HaLechem, the 2 loaves of bread, plus the 2 lambs that are linked to it. These are shlamim, right, peace offerings, and they're waved together. Remember, they're linked together. Then the next sacrifices are, there's a bull, 2 rams, and 7 lambs. These are olot, they are burnt offerings, they're put on the mizbeach, and then there's a goat that is a chatat, a sin offering. So now the Gemara tells us, the Mishnah tells us, that if you have these, the olot, right, the bull, rams, and lambs, if you have these without bread, then that's okay. The bread is essential and you can't bring the lambs without the bread. Remember, there are 2 lambs that go together with the 2 loaves of bread. Those are essential for each other. So here it says, the bread is essential, and therefore you can't bring the lambs without the bread. But if you have the bread, you can bring them without the lambs. Okay, or another opinion is no. If you don't have lambs, you cannot bring the bread. And again, maybe, right, if you don't have the bread, you can bring the lambs. Again, the question is which one can be brought without the other. The Gemara says, how do I know that is still in the Mishnah? This is because in the desert, they brought the lambs without the bread. And that's how we see that you could bring the lambs without the bread. The law, that's the law, but not for that reason, but because the lambs are what's called a matir for themselves, meaning they allow themselves to be eaten after they are sacrificed, and the loaves cannot be brought and then the loaves can't be brought again without the lambs. Okay, why? Because there's no actual, like the loaves themselves, there's no avodah, there's no service done with those loaves. So now the Gemara is going to explain. In the desert, they were not obligated to bring the lambs because there was no bread. The lambs of the Musaf are different than the lambs of the Shtei HaLechem. Remember, there are different sacrifices that were brought. So the lambs of the Musaf, of the Musaf, those they were able to bring. Okay, there's the verse says or uses certain words that imply that things are essential, right? Like yihiyu or tihiyena, they need to be this way, both about the bread. So therefore, the bread is essential, or maybe it was both about the lambs, and therefore the lambs are essential, right? And can you learn one from the other? Some say yes and some say no. Da 46, if you already did the shchita, the slaughtering, and then the lambs, when you do shchita, that links the lambs with the bread, with the Shtei HaLechem, and then they become essential for each other. What if they were waved together? Again, that's called tnufa. If they're waved together, so does that link them? Remember we said shchita links them for sure. What about tnufa? What about waving them? So if the loaves, so now the Gemara brings the case of the korban todah, the Thanksgiving sacrifice, which comes with 40 loaves. So if one of the loaves that was going to be given, if the loaf broke before shchita, so then you bring another loaf. If afterwards, so then if it breaks after shchita, the blood is still able to be put on the mizbeach, again, the blood of the animal, and the meat can be eaten, but the owner does not fulfill his obligation. And the bread is invalid, again, because it needs to be whole, and it broke after shchita. If the blood was already thrown on the mizbeach, on the altar, so then he just that's like the end of the process. You switch out the broken loaf for a whole one, and you give that to the Kohen. So that works. Okay, another case is if we had that the loaf of bread or matzah broke. And the next case is if the loaf was taken out of the courtyard of the Beit HaMikdash, right? That's called Yotze. If that happened before Shchita, so then you bring it back and it's fine. If it's after Shchita, you can still put the blood on the altar and the meat can be eaten, but the bread is invalid. And if you already put the blood on the altar, you can take one of the loaves and you switch out the loaf and you give it to the Kohen. Next case is if the bread becomes impure, if it becomes tameh before slaughtering, before shchita, you bring a new loaf. If after shchita, you still put the blood on the altar and you bring and the meat can be eaten, and the owner does fulfill their obligation. Here it's different because of impurity. If you remember, we talked about the tzitz, right? The headband that the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, wore, that allows things that became impure it allows things that became impure to become acceptable. Yes, Zohar, the Shtei HaLechem are chametz. Right now we're talking about the Todah. The Korban Todah has 40 loaves, but 10 of them are chametz, but 30 of them are not chametz. There are different types of cracker / matzah. The Shtei HaLechem of Shavuot are chametz. So I'm just going to call it loaves. Sometimes they are actually chametz, meaning bread, and most of the time it is, depending on what we're talking about, most of the time it is not chametz, meaning it's a loaf, but it's what we would call in Israel like a lafa, like a soft like a pita or something, but it's not bread. It does not have leavening. It hasn't risen. Okay. If the bread again, so I'm going to use the word bread or loaf, but sometimes it means actual bread and sometimes it means matzah, but for a different okay, fine. If the loaf is invalid, is the sacrifice also invalid? So the Gemara says, well, it depends, right? If we're talking about the Todah, that is different because it's a shlamim and it's valid even if it does not have the loaf. As opposed to, we were talking about the Shtei HaLechem, those are essential for each other. If you did the waving, and then the bread got lost. Now we're talking about the Shtei HaLechem. So if you bring a new loaf, does that need to be waved again before shchita or not? So the Gemara brings another case. If the lamb got lost and you bring a new one, you do need to do tnufa again. You need to wave it again. So again, Shtei HaLechem, the 2 loaves, and Shtei HaKvasim, the 2 lambs, if they are waved together, therefore they are linked. The Todah and the loaves, there's no other sacrifice brought at the same time, and therefore it's a little bit different. The Shtei HaLechem, these 2 loaves, are similar to the ram of the Nazir. It sacrifices the loaf, right? It comes together with loaves that again come with that sacrifice. If you don't have the lambs and you bring the bread, the Shtei HaLechem alone, again you wave them around and then you leave them overnight and you burn them the next day, again because you are missing the lambs. Really, they could have been eaten on that day, but there's a decree that again because you don't have lambs, you're not going to eat them this year because we're scared that next year you'll say, wait, why do I need lambs? Last year I just had the bread and it was fine and we ate it. So there was a decree made that you do not eat the loaves. Okay. The Shtei HaLechem, again, these two loaves are called a mincha, and they could be a problem for the Kohanim to eat them because, and this is very appropriate, if you remember, we did mention this previously, but if you remember the machatzit shekel, right, the half shekel that was collected in Adar, so that is used to buy the communal sacrifices. Now, one of those sacrifices is the Shtei HaLechem. Now, if you remember, the Kohanim, if they bring a mincha, a grain offering, it gets burnt on the mizbeach. It does not get eaten. So the Kohanim thought, well, if we give machatzita shekel, the half a shekel, and it goes to buy the Shtei HaLechem, so then how can we eat the Shtei HaLechem? It becomes like ours. But here the Gemara says the Gemara says it could be a problem. Now, again, we say that it's actually a mitzvah to burn the Shtei HaLechem if it comes by itself, meaning without the lambs. And you burn them on Yom Tov. Again, why you burn it the next day, right? Maybe you'll find some lambs on that first day, and therefore you say, let's wait till the next day to burn them. Or maybe you can actually burn them that day. The Shtei HaLechem are called bikurim, right? Like the first fruit. Therefore, they can be brought by themselves, and really you can eat them that day, but we don't because of the decree that I mentioned. Okay, Daf 47, the Kohanim can only eat the loaves after Shchita, right after the animal was slaughtered. Now, if the shchita is done with, I'll call it, I don't want to say wrong intention, but what's called lo lishma, right? If you remember, not with the right intent for maybe you had it in mind, a different sacrifice. You didn't, the Kohen didn't have in mind this sacrifice when he slaughtered the animal. So if the shchita was done lo lishma, not for the name of this sacrifice, you cannot eat it. If the shchita is done lishma, meaning for the right sacrifice, but the putting of the blood on the altar is lo lishma, again for a different sacrifice, it is sanctified and it is not sanctified. That's one opinion. Or it is not kadosh. It is not sanctified and you cannot eat it. So here the Gemara says that the shchita is what needs to be done lishma with the proper intention, or maybe all the services need to be done lishma. Okay, the bread, the lechem, needs to be in the courtyard when you slaughter the animal. It can't be anywhere else. What does it mean? It's sanctified, but not 100% sanctified. So the Gemara says that if it has, originally it has, so sorry. Okay, so if it becomes sanctified of the actual physical body, right, what's called kedushat haguf, right, it becomes the body of the animal becomes sanctified, so then you cannot redeem it. And if it has even partial kedushat damim, that means its value is sanctified, but its body isn't, so then you can redeem it. So that would be the differentiation. If the Shtei HaLechem go out of the courtyard between shchita, again slaughtering, and zrika, putting the blood on the altar, and the zrika was done with intent to eat the lambs at the wrong time, remember pigul, so the bread does not become pigul because again it went out, or it actually does become pigul, right? So here there's a machloket if zrika, if putting the blood on the altar has an effect on something that left the courtyard or not. Okay, if the lechem, if the bread can become pigul, even if it went outside, again out of the mizbeach, so then maybe if the zrika, if the putting of the blood on the altar is done lo lishma, meaning not with the proper intent, so then the bread could still be eaten, again because maybe it doesn't affect it, or no, what we just said in terms of these intents, maybe that's only to be stringent, but not to be lenient. Maybe the machloket is only if it was already brought back, right? Again, brought back into the courtyard, and then they put the blood on the altar. Or even maybe it's also if the lechem, the loaf is still outside of the courtyard. Okay, the lambs, now again, they need to be slaughtered with the proper intent, but then let's say you lost the bread, so can you do zrika, can you put the blood on the altar, lo lishma, meaning on purpose, not with the intent of this sacrifice, so that you can eat the meat. If it would have been done with the proper intent, then it becomes linked to the loaves, and the loaves are lost, and then you wouldn't be able to eat the meat. So that is the question, right? Maybe it's like a Pesach, Korban Pesach, which also works, very well for right now, because they say, we learned in the Gemara that 30 days before a holiday, you're supposed to learn the laws of that holiday. And today we are actually, I know you're not going to want to hear it, but we're actually 30 days away from Pesach. So the Gemara says maybe we should link, maybe we should compare this to the Korban Pesach, that if you slaughter the Pesach before midday, before Chatzot, but you did it lo lishma, again, lo lishma means not with the intent of this sacrifice, you thought it was a different sacrifice, so then it becomes valid, even though you'd think that because you had the wrong intent, it should be invalid, but because it's in the wrong time, it still is valid. Or maybe we should say it's like the Korban Pesach after Pesach. Remember, if you didn't slaughter your Korban Pesach for some reason, which is not good, and you waited till after Pesach, so then if you did it lo lishma, right, not for the sake of a Pesach, then it is valid because it's just a korban shlamim, and that would be valid. Or maybe this is like a todah, right, a todah, which even if you lost the bread, you can still bring the sacrifice, right? But we say maybe that's because the todah is called a shlamim, that's why it's okay, but it's not the same thing as the the lambs of Shavuot. Okay, if you did shchita on 2 lambs, but let's say there are 4 loaves, so then two become sanctified, and two, you can redeem them, and you can eat them. Okay, Daf 48. If again, two so we said you can redeem these loaves and then you can eat them. So the question is, where are you doing this this redemption? If it takes place, if it takes if you take all four of them outside, you can't do that because two are sanctified, and you can't do it inside because two of them are chulin, are not sanctified. So the Gemara says no, it's actually done inside, meaning in the Beit HaMikdash, because they are chulin on their own, which is okay. Or maybe you actually have to do it outside. If the Todah is slaughtered and there are 80 loaves, again, there are supposed to be 40 loaves, but if there are 80 loaves, only 40 become sanctified, or 40 aren't sanctified, right? Meaning you need to say 40 out of the 80 are sanctified, right? Which is similar to the case with the Shtei HaLechem. If you did shchita on 4 lambs and 2 loaves, right? Now again, you only needed 2 loaves, so you take 2 of them out and you put the blood on the mizbeach lo lishma, meaning not thinking which sacrifice it is, and then 2 are valid, and you have to do it in this order, meaning first the invalid ones and then the valid ones. Okay, so okay, then we say, but wait a minute, you're actually having someone do the sacrifice in the wrong way on purpose. So the Gemara says, yeah, it's better to do a sin with the chatat to save the other chatat. Meaning, the point is, if you do one of them in the wrong way, you're saving the other one to do it in the right way. So the Gemara says we actually do that. We do, I guess the word is sin, right? We do things that we're not supposed to do in order to prevent a larger sin. Okay, the kivsei hatzeret, again, these lambs on Shavuot, if you shechted them, if you slaughter them, lo lishma, so then you have to leave them overnight, and then you burn them the next day. Again, it's compared to a chatat, and therefore they must be done lishma. They have to be done the right way, or maybe they're connected to the other shlamim, and therefore if you do the slaughtering lo lishma, they would still be valid. So we see that it actually is a machluket. Okay, if you brought an asham, a guilt offering, but you brought it an animal that was the wrong age, so you leave it overnight and then you burn it, meaning you destroy it. But if it's an olah, it is valid even if it is the wrong age. Why? Because an olah that is obligatory, an olat chova, is compared to an olat nedava, which is a voluntary olah, and that would also be valid if it was the wrong age. Now, an asham, if you slaughtered it lo lishma, it's still valid, but if you shechted it early, meaning at the wrong time, or the wrong age, that would be invalid. Okay, we learned something that's done improperly from something that is done improperly. So the Gemara is comparing different scenarios, but you can't learn from something done properly to something that's done improperly. Okay, Daf 49, these lambs that we were talking about, let's say they were slaughtered as rams, like you thought that they were rams, but rams are older lambs, right? Lambs are the babies and rams are the parents. So let's say you slaughtered the lambs, but you thought that they were rams. It is still valid, but it doesn't count for the community, and you need to bring new animals. Or maybe it is valid and it does count. But that would only be if you thought that they were rams, but you did the shchita thinking that they were lambs, meaning like you knew they were rams, but then you had in mind that they were lambs. Sorry that rhymes. But if you did it for the sake of rams, right, they were rams and you thought that they were rams and you knew that they were rams, so then that is invalid because that is not the age of this sacrifice. Okay, and therefore, here the Gemara then discusses uprooting a designation, right? Does it work? The term in Hebrew is akira b'ta'ut, havya akira. So you are like uprooting what this thing is supposed to be. So if you do it by accident, it does count. Yes, Ilanit is saying that they are male. These sacrifices were male, so therefore the use is rams, yes, as opposed to ewes. Okay, if you thought that they were a shlamim, but really it was a chatat. So again, you had the wrong sacrifice in mind, and then you had a pigul thought. Remember, pigul is the wrong intention, either the wrong day, right? So the wrong time. So that does work. So it shows that you uprooted what the sacrifice was designated for. Okay. Back to Menachot, again, our grain offering. If the kmitza, remember the kmitza, when you take the handful, if it's done lo lishma, it's valid. So the Gemara says, wait, but why is that different? Because it's obvious what kind of mincha you are making based on your actions. We still haven't learned this yet, but there are different types of grain offerings. And if you fry it, if you bake it, if you break it up into pieces, all the actions that you're doing show which sacrifice you are bringing. Therefore, it matters less what your intent is. But it would be different when you're sacrificing an animal because the avodah, the service, is the same, no matter what animal we are talking about. Okay, even though you had wrong intention by mistake, we see what the mincha is based on your action. So there's no uprooting what the sacrifice is because I can tell by the actions. If it's not clear what should be done, if it's not clear, though, then it would be invalid. And if it is clear that you're doing it wrong, it would still be valid because you're still doing the right action. Okay, next Mishnah on Daf 49. The tamid, okay, so the korban tamid, the daily sacrifice, isn't ma'akev the musaf, right? So tamid is brought every day. A musaf, an additional sacrifice, is brought on certain days, on Rosh Chodesh, on holidays, on Shabbat. So they are not essential one for the other. And the musafim, even of one day, they are not essential for each other. If you didn't do the tamid in the morning for whatever reason, again, the tamid was brought, it's the first sacrifice brought every day, and it's the last sacrifice that's brought in the afternoon. So if you didn't do the one in the morning, you still do the tamid of the afternoon. Or no, that's only if it was done by accident. But if you did it on purpose, you cannot bring the afternoon tamid. If you didn't do the morning ktoret, again, ktoret also was burnt in the morning and in the afternoon. If you didn't do the morning ktoret, you do it in the afternoon. And you burn all of it in the afternoon. And this is the way that they inaugurated the gold altar, with the burning of the Ktoret. Okay, since we're talking about inaugurating things in the temple, you inaugurate the mizbeach, the altar outside in the courtyard with the morning tamid. You inaugurate the shulchan, the table with the lechem apanim on Shabbat, and you inaugurate the menorah, and you inaugurate the menorah as well. So. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to explain that if the community doesn't have enough animals for the tamid and for the musaf, so which one do you bring? Again, if there's a shortage, if there's a shortage of animals, so this goes back to a machloket that we've seen in the past. If we're talking about the tamid of that day and the musaf of that day, you bring the tamid. Remember, we discussed tadir, v'she'eno tadir kodem, right? Things that are more frequent are done first. Therefore, the tamid trumps the musaf. Again, tamid is done twice a day. If they need the tamid for tomorrow, but the musaf for today, so then what do you do? Because one is for today and one is for tomorrow. So is our Mishnah really about precedence? So the Gemara says, no, the tamid is always first. Rather, maybe we're talking about there isn't enough animals for both. It must be about the tamid of tomorrow and the musaf of today, and they have the same status. Or maybe we do have enough animals, and the mitzvah is to bring the tamid first, but you could bring the musaf first if you did it by accident. Okay, since we're talking about lambs and sacrifices, you need to keep at least 6 lambs in the chamber, in the temple complex. Why do you need 6 lambs? Because you need to watch over lambs that are going to be sacrifices for at least 4 days before the sacrifice. And therefore, you need these 6 animals there. It needs to be enough for, let's say you have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah and Shabbat, so that's 6 animals in a row. Therefore, you always need to have 6 in this chamber. But what about all the other animals for all the other sacrifices on those days? So the Gemara says, no, we're just teaching that it's like what happens if it's Rosh Hashanah and Shabbat, but that's not the case, meaning anytime you would have to do this, right? Because we said we have to check the animals at least 4 days before the korban. How do we know this? Right, we dafka learn it from korban Pesach, right? They're told to take the animal on the 10th of Nisan, and the sacrifice is sacrificed on the 14th of Nisan. Okay, then the Gemara says, really, you should say 7, not 6, because you need a tamid for 2, right, for the next day after Rosh Hashanah and Shabbat, or maybe even 8. Maybe it's Friday afternoon. So the Gemara says, again, on Daf 50, no, really, we're just talking about in general, and every day needs to have 6 in the chamber. And Rosh Hashanah and Shabbat is a way to remember remember how many you need. Okay, so then the Gemara says that we're actually missing some information from our Mishnah, that if the Mizbeach was never used, so then you can't use it for the first time with the afternoon tamid. The morning tamid has to be the first thing that is on the mizbeach. How do we know this? The verse says that the afternoon tamid is second because you already brought the morning tamid. If the Kohanim didn't bring the tamid in the morning on purpose, they cannot bring it in the afternoon. So the Gemara says, well, wait a minute, why should the altar suffer? So the Gemara says, you're right. It's the priest, the Kohanim, who didn't bring that sacrifice, can't bring the afternoon sacrifice, but someone else can. Okay, back to the Toret, the incense. It's only brought once a day, and it makes people wealthy, and therefore people generally did not forget about it, and therefore if you forgot about it, you actually can bring it in the afternoon. There's a machloket if the inauguration of the gold altar is of the incense is done in the afternoon, or maybe it's done in the morning, right? If it's in the afternoon, it's compared to the menorah, the candelabra. But if it's in the morning, it's because it's compared to the mizbeach that we just mentioned. So let's go to the next Mishnah. Now we're going to talk about what's called the Minachat Chavitin. This was a sacrifice that was brought by the Kohen Gadol, and it's brought in the morning. Half is sacrificed in the morning, half is sacrificed in the afternoon. Now, you bring the full isaron, that's the measurement, and then you split it up. What happens if the Kohen Gadol brings his half in the morning and then he dies, and now you have a new Kohen Gadol? You can't bring the old Kohen Gadol's other half. Rather, the new one has to bring a full isaron, and then you sacrifice half of it and you burn the other half of it. So now the Gemara explains that the verse says you take half of it in the morning, which teaches that you have to bring the whole thing in the morning. You also have to, if you're going to burn the other half, you have to wait overnight, and then you can destroy the other half. What else with this minchat chavitin? First it's baked and then it's fried, or maybe the opposite, it's fried and then it's baked. They're both using the same word. It says that it needs to be tufine. Tufine is a hard word, and it seemingly doesn't mean anything. So they said maybe it means te'afena na or na'eh. Bake it either partially or in a beautiful way. There's actually a bakery in Jerusalem called Tufine, which is very cute. So maybe it means to bake it nicely. Therefore, it means you have to bake it first and then fry it, or it means bake it raw or like partially cooked. Therefore, you fry it and then you bake it. Okay, daf 51, right? It needs to be made on Shabbat. It actually overrides Shabbat. and you have to add extra oil to this sacrifice. And you add either 3 log or maybe 1 log, and the Gemara connects it to different menachot to see how much extra oil you add to this sacrifice. Okay, next, the last Mishnah for today. If they didn't appoint, remember we said there was a Kohen Gadol, and then he dies, and they put a new one. What happens if they did not appoint a new Kohen Gadol? You still need to bring the Chavitin, this sacrifice, and then there's a machloket who pays for it. Either the community pays for it, or the heirs of the original Kohen Gadol have to pay for it, and you have to bring it whole, not in halves. And the Gemara explains that on the day of the inauguration of the Kohen Gadol, he brings his own sacrifice, and that's something he's going to bring every day that he's in the Beit HaMikdash. But the regular Kohanim, they just bring this sacrifice on their first day on the job, but after that they do not bring this sacrifice. This sacrifice was burnt completely, as I mentioned before, like the other menachot of the Kohanim. The court instituted 7 things about sacrifices and nesachim, and these libations, and one of the things that they said is that the community pays for the Chavitin of the Kohen Gadol. Really, that's deoraita, but they made the decree because first they made a decree that the heirs should pay for it, but when they couldn't afford it, so then they made a decree that the community should do it. Another decree that they made was about the para aduma, the red heifer, that its ashes, if you use them, it is not called mi'ilah. It's not seen as misappropriating things that are sanctified. Really, it is really deoraita from the Torah. But when they saw that people were using it for health reasons, they decreed that there is mi'ilah and you're not allowed to use it. And when they stopped using it, so then they returned it to the original decree that it isn't mi'ilah. And with that, we are going to stop for today. Baruch Hashem, we were able to learn straight through. So we should just have, Mamash, Baruch Hashem, we should just have good, good news, Besarot Tovot. Hold on, I missed some of your comments. How does one actually intend to eat at the wrong time? Is it that one does not know the correct time, or one? Okay. Yes, it's not. It's done on purpose, meaning you're like, oh, I'm so full, I can't eat anything today. I'll just save this sacrifice for tomorrow. That's pigul. You are on purpose messing up the sacrifice, and that would be pigul. So yeah, that's what we were mentioning before.
Thank you. Yes, I've been wondering about that, but I just can't imagine. I mean, they've been instructed about that, and they're conscious of their thoughts, and they know that they're doing that, and I just don't understand. But you said it would be conscious, and they did it. So that answers my question.
And one could say that, it's written about very forcefully in order to make sure that the Kohanim don't do this, right? We said if it's really pigul, you get karet, meaning it's very serious. So I think these discussions are here to scare the Kohanim, to make sure that they're very conscious and aware of the proper intent that they need. So yeah. Yeah. Okay. I see we have a 2 minute, a few minutes. So if anybody has any questions, I know that.
We have one other question on the chat. I wonder where they kept the many daily multiple animals for the week of Pesach and Sukkot.
Yeah, I think they rotated them through the lishka, through that chamber. I think that there are a lot of animals on I mean Sukkot has the most. I think that they were just brought daily to the Beit HaMikdash. I don't know if there was room for 70 animals, but maybe. I don't remember the discussion, right? We know that, let's say, Korban Pesach, every owner was careful to bring, right? They brought their own animals. So, yeah, I think that I guess people were in charge of watching those animals.
Yeah, those large communal offerings, the many, many bulls, the whatever. So if they, first of all, that to bring them one each day's in the day before, maybe not impossible. But do they have to watch for 4 days?
They do, but they don't necessarily have to be on the Temple Mount. So again, the lishkata kvasim, like the lambs, I think there are on the Temple Mount. I don't know if all. I don't know if all. I can't imagine all the animals are there, but it's a great question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
I
Aliza.
know you've taught us that there are 12 either individual or categorizations of sacrifices. Is there an all-encompassing comment that would say this a minimal amount of this for everybody, or is it always circumstantial?
You don't understand the question. For what?
Well, if you have 12, so there's going to be a minimum that has to be brought for those 12 categories. One, or does it change according to Stephen? Yeah.
Okay. Then, right, multiple types of sacrifices. Every day there were, again, there are sacrifices that are brought every day, communal sacrifices. So the
Yeah.
korban tamid was a burnt offering, an olah, one animal brought in the morning, one animal brought in the afternoon. That's
Okay.
something that was done every day.
That's
Now,
the minimum. That's where it starts.
exactly,
And then
minimum.
it kind of changes
Now,
according to.
depending on the day, that's communal sacrifices. So on Rosh Chodesh, you bring the musaf, right? You add, musaf means to add. There were sacrifices that were added on musaf. So Rosh Chodesh, right? So if there's a holiday, then it becomes almost exponential based on the holiday. So like we're talking about Sukkot, right? If you look in the Torah tells us how many animals for which sacrifice for which day are brought. So there's
Okay.
almost like a formula for every day of the year for communal sacrifices. Then you also have individual sacrifices. So like we just learned, the Kohen Gadol brings a grain offering every day. There are people who come to the temple every day, just like in a doctor's office. You never know who you're going to see. So there's sin offerings, there's Thanksgiving whoever comes can bring different sacrifices based on their obligations. And those are done generally during the week. We do not bring any, again, depends if it's obligation versus voluntary, right? You can wake up one day and say like, oh, I want to bring a sacrifice to the temple. You can volunteer a sacrifice. So there's communal, which is structured, and then there's individual. An individual has obligations and voluntary sacrifices. So those are all could be, those are not
Changeable.
random, but
Changeable.
right, exactly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Exactly.
And that's where you were saying the individual could wake up one day, and you could have cause for a todah offering. I mean, you've just been rescued from danger, etc. But on Pesach, the todah comes with the 40 loaves and 10 are chametz. And so they outlaw the todah offerings during the week of Pesach, from what I understood.
Right.
So
Meaning
you'll
there's
have to hold
no
off on your
korban.
gratitude and your celebration
There's-
until after.
Correct. There's no korban Pesach on starting from Erev Pesach, from
No
Erev
korban todah.
Pesach through all of Pesach. Correct. There is no korban todah. Those are postponed till after Pesach.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All
Again,
right.
I'm again, hats off to the Kohanim to know all these things. It's
Mamash,
amazing.
this is
Wow.
yes, a lot of details. All right, wishing everyone just safety and health
Yes,
and
yes.
good news and Be'ezrat Hashem. Okay, next week we're going back to Tuesday nights. So Tuesday night, Be'ezrat Hashem, next week. I will send out an email also.
When will we be reconvening on Har Bayit?
Be'ezrat Hashem, I'm
Tomorrow.
ready.
Tomorrow, book
I'm
your
ready.
flights.
I'm ready.
I
I
was
will bring
actually,
my.
I actually thought that when they started it on Shabbat, Shabbat Parashat Zachor, I said, it's going to be all over by Purim. Yay! It's exactly, but it's not.
Yeah,
But
Sorry.
one day at a time.
they're advancing faster than originally planned, so it's great.
Yeah, well, remember in the original Purim, they took out Haman 11 months before they did the final battle that we're now celebrating. So
but
there's
you
a little
saw
bit of
how
a
many-
lag time, you know?
But how many they killed in one day was amazing.
Yeah.
Don't you think it's ironic that we read in the Megillah about this, that, and then all of a sudden it's still Iran that is bothering us?
That's right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yep.
I know.
And the current leader's name is Khamenei.
Oh,
Many.
Be safe. We were praying for you, Rabbanit.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care and thank
thank you. Bye-bye.